call our November 21st, 2017 Board of Zoning Appeals meeting to order and ask you to join me for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll first start this evening with introduction of our board members. Starting to my right,
Kim Keller,
Todd Chernick,
Hodge Patel,
Don Kurtz,
Ken Sisson.
Before we get too far along in tonight's meeting, I'd like to seek a motion regarding our agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I'll ask if we could move item 6A to the first item before item 5, because that is going to be requested to be deferred. I know some people are here on that and can handle that and let them on their way.
I'd make a motion to move item V17017, 12455 Broadwell Road to the first item on the agenda.
Following our first item prior to our primary variances?
Yes.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion to amend moving item 6A to the first case has been approved, unanimous. Make a motion to approve our October meeting minutes as published.
Actually, before you do that, can you adopt the agenda as amended?
I'm sorry. I make a motion to adopt our agenda as amended.
I second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So our adopted agenda has been approved unanimous. Make a motion to approve the October 2017 meeting minutes as published.
I second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion regarding the published meeting minutes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's passed unanimous. Mr. Sisson abstained as he was not a member last month. The Board of Zoning Appeals is a quasi-judicial board comprised of resident volunteers of the City of Milton. The board is charged with hearing requests for variances from the standards of the zoning ordinance and appeals of administrative determination. With regard to decisions on primary variances, the board's basis for decision is provided by these four considerations. A, relief if granted would not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance, and B, there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant. And C, relief if granted would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. And D, that the public safety, health, and welfare are secured and that substantial justice is done. We'll now move on to case V17-017, which is a consideration of appeal of secondary variances.
Mr. Chairman, before we move on to consideration of V17017, there are two issues I'd like to address in order. One is a motion regarding the standard time that is allowed for appeals in a secondary variance situation, and the second will be then to seek a deferral. The parties, or the appellant and the city, have been working on getting this matter appropriately prepared and being able to present valid and sufficient presentation to this board. In order to do that, we're going to need both a little more time to get prepared, and the applicant has requested additional time to present at the hearing itself. The city is supportive of that request. So the first thing I'd like to do is ask for the board to make a motion to amend its standard bylaws to allow each side, the applicant or the appellant and the city, to have rather than the standard 15 minutes, 30 minutes for their presentations. If you could make that motion at this meeting before we defer, the parties will be able to appropriately prepare their presentations when the meeting is called. So I'd ask if that motion could be made.
So in making that amendment to a motion for amendment to our bylaws, would that be just for this case or a standing?
It would be just for this particular agenda item.
Okay. And the request, just to make sure I'm clear, is for a 30-minute presentation window for each party for this appeal.
Right, yes, rather than the 15 minutes prescribed in Section 8 of your bylaws, you would be allowing 30 minutes.
Okay.
For each side.
For each party, correct. Okay. I'll make a motion to amend Section 8 of our bylaws for the upcoming hearing on V17-017 to allow for 30-minute presentation for each party.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion regarding this proposed amendment? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passed unanimous.
Thank you. And as I mentioned, the parties are in the process of getting background materials prepared and their presentations prepared. And in order to have sufficient time to do that, we would like to ask that the matter be deferred to the December meeting. I believe that's December 19th. That the regular meeting of
Our next
this
scheduled
board.
meeting,
Yes.
correct. And the applicant is also agreeable to this?
Yes, and I believe they're present to support that as well.
Okay, based on the thumbs up from the crowd for the record. Okay, so with that, we'll make a motion to defer V17-017 to our next scheduled Board of Zoning Appeals meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passed unanimous for deferral.
Thank you.
We'll then move on to primary variances, which are based, our considerations are based on the four conditions I read earlier, starting with case V17-015, 14990 Birmingham Highway. Would staff please present?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is case V17-015. The site, 14990 Birmingham Highway, is a single-family home located on a 2.4-acre lot in the rural Milton overlay. The property is zoned AG1. There is a man-made lake in the rear of the property. In February of 2015, the Board of Zoning Appeals approved a variance, V15002, that allowed a 594-square-foot pool to encroach 25 feet into the 75-foot impervious setback and 14 feet into the 50-foot stream pond buffer. The original owners did not build the pool and subsequently sold the property. The new applicant, represented by Vance Stover, is the representative for the current property owners, Mike and Julie Johnson. The Johnsons have modified the plans for the pool that they would like to build. Per the new plan, the pool encroaches 35 feet into the 75-foot impervious setback and into the 50-foot buffer by 9 feet 5 inches. Since the 2015 variance was conditioned to a specific site plan, a new variance is required. In preparation for the new pool, in the summer of 2017, the Johnsons built a 3-foot retaining wall that encroached into the 25-foot state stream buffer. On September 22nd, the city staff issued a notice of violation to the owners for this disturbance and required that they obtain approval from the state EPD for the work. The state responded that since the disturbance was around 110 square feet, they would consider this work minor homeowner land disturbing activity. A variance from the state was not required. The owners have agreed to a replanting plan with the city arborist to mitigate the buffer disturbance and recompense for the trees that were removed. Section 20-426I states that no disturbance or structures are allowed in the 50-foot stream pond buffer. Section 20-426-2 states that no impervious surfaces are allowed in the 75-foot setback. Since the applicant proposes to construct a pool and deck that encroaches 50 feet into the pond buffer and into the 75-foot impervious setback. A two-part variance is required. Comments from the Design Review Board courtesy review. It seems that if you rotate the pool, you can get it out of the 50-foot buffer. Provide a site plan showing how close the pool is to the house. Show dimensions of how much intrusion the pool is creating into the buffer. Staff held a focus meeting on August 2nd, 2017, at which the following comments were provided. Site plan review, the city architect and DOT had no comments. The city arborist stated that a replanting plan has been approved for the disturbance in the 25-foot stream buffer, and this work should be done prior to the certificate of completion for the pool. Stormwater stated the state EPD considers the retaining wall built in the 25-foot buffer minor land disturbance, and no further remediation is required for the state. The standards for consideration were read earlier, and the applicant responds as follows, and I'm going to reference the letter of appeal. We are seeking a variance to encroach into the 50-foot stream pond buffer and to allow encroachment into the 75-foot impervious setback. Even though this is a large lot, there are no other areas to build the pool. And then he goes on to state that there was a variance previously approved, case B15002. The staff response: the buffer requirements changed after this house was built. The existing house already encroaches into the 75-foot impervious setback. The applicant is building a retaining wall to minimize encroachment into the buffer and is proposing a rain garden in order to mitigate the runoff from the impervious surfaces in the buffer and setback. There is no area between the house and the pond that is not in the impervious setback or buffer. The pool cannot be built without intrusion into the buffers or impervious setback. The buffers changed, as I stated before, after this home was built. This creates an extraordinary condition that is beyond the control of the homeowners. By minimizing the intrusion and mitigating the runoff, the proposed project will be protective of natural resources and the environment. Should the board choose to approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions. Clad the retaining wall with stone to match the existing rock wall and walkway. Staff recommends approval with conditions of this request.
Are there any questions for staff? I have one question, and it's the site plan that we have dated
June 15th?
June 15th, thank you, from Placid Pools. Is this the largest version you have?
It is.
The dimensions are very hard to
And I
identify.
Let's see, wait, let me check. This is the new one or the old one.
Is that the previous variance?
So is this where it's going to be 35 feet to the,
That's fine.
okay,
It's hard to tell.
yeah.
I'm not sure why that one's so funny. This one fuzzy, that one might be a little clearer.
Angela, where on here is the 35-foot encroachment?
Actually, it's 25. I'm not sure why I put it's anybody else need one a little less fuzzy?
Oh, this is better.
Copies.
Yes, thank you. Can you see this?
It's home for you to look at it.
I think that's the old one. Same number we're talking about.
So that's the one here.
This is the original variance. Yeah. That's what I thought. Yeah. This is the new one.
Thank you.
What's over here? Where's the pond? Is the pond over here?
It's back here.
Right here. This is the 75-foot line right here. So it encroaches from here to here, all of this.
And that
And
little
the pond's
nodule,
over here?
This is the pond.
Oh, okay, there it is.
So that's the first 75, and then that's showing everything. But then this would be, I think from here to here is the 50, and then from here to here is 25.
Well, here it says the pool encroaches 35 feet into the 75-foot.
Well, he measured from here to here, so it's
It's really not 30.
25. The impervious setback is only 25 feet.
Okay,
And
so
then 9.5 into the stream
50,
buffer?
Into the 50, huh?
And that's the little nodule here off this kidney bean
Yes.
shaped pool? Okay, you see that? So this is the pool. You see this nodule? That's what's
He
going into the
measured the
stream
whole
buffer?
thing. It's
This little portion here?
not from the
Otherwise,
point, I
this is the
understand.
impervious setback.
Okay.
Okay.
Ken, are you following along on that? Yep. Okay. So it's, my last question, just for the record, the 750 square foot on here is the pool deck itself, and then the 495 square foot is the pool itself.
Right.
Okay. Kidney-shaped pool with a nodule. All right. Providing for full encroachment into the impervious, partial encroachment into the stream buffer. Okay, any additional questions for staff?
How far is it from the edge of the pool to the pond?
To the man-made stream?
Whatever it is, I thought it was a pond. We'd assume it's... Angela, how far is the edge of the pool to the pond?
So it would be 50 less 9.5, right? So it would be 40 and a half? 40 and a half feet.
So 14 feet from the edge of the pool to the pond.
40 and a half.
40 and a half, sorry.
Yeah, 40 and a half.
Okay.
That correct? Okay. Any additional questions for staff?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand you said that the ordinance was changed after the house was already there, but the ordinance was changed prior to the current owners being there?
Yes,
Okay,
2007.
okay.
Angela, do you know when the current property owner purchased the property?
It was last year sometime.
The first variance was in 15, right, that they didn't use, correct? The previous, yeah. So
We
it's
can
only
ask
been
the
about
applicant some of
2
these
years.
questions as well. Okay, with that, would the applicant please come forward and present? You had the benefit of hearing some of our questions, so.
Yeah, my name is Vance Dover. I'm with Georgia Classic Pool. The homeowners had to travel out of town this week on the holiday, so I hopefully can answer any questions you might have.
Okay.
I don't know exactly when they purchased the house, but it was, I think, as she said, probably last year sometime between when the other variance was approved. I think it was 2016.
Okay. Any other highlights you'd care to share regarding the
She
plans?
really did a great job of covering everything. I mean, I'm here for questions, but everything she outlined is, I don't think I have anything to add to that.
Okay. I have a question, and it's related to one of the comments from staff reviews and other committee reviews regarding the opportunity to move, bad choice of words, to move the pool closer to the home in order to mitigate the encroachment into the 50-foot stream buffer. It looks like, based on the size of the pool deck, there may be an opportunity or not to move the pool closer to the home. So what is the distance, the closest distance from the back of the home to the edge of the pool?
You know, I was just there the other day, and we kind of walked it off. I don't know exactly what that measurement is, but it's not as much space as you would think. And I think trying to squeeze a pool right up next to the house just wouldn't be really ideal for use either. I mean, it's a pretty small pool.
Right. Well, we're lacking dimensions, and I want to make sure for our benefit as well as the public here, we understand what limitations we have.
Okay.
So can you give me a estimate of the current proposed distance of the pool at the closest point to the home?
Based on these numbers here, it looks like it's about 10 feet.
Right. So pulling if I were to move the pool closer to the home to mitigate the 9.5-foot encroachment, it would be a half foot off the home.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. That was one of the questions that was raised in staff report. Is there an opportunity to shift the plan?
Yeah, we were out there and just kind of tried to do everything we can to get it closer, and there's just no room to get it closer. I mean, 10 feet from the house is pretty close already.
Understood. Any further questions?
The design that's been chosen here, I'm sure is really nice, but can that not be modified to make the fit a little better? It looks, I mean, you have that one sort of lobe sticking out, and I mean, if you took that off and you could get closer to the house, has anybody looked at, or have you looked at
Yeah, but you're only talking about maybe a couple of feet. And then with this being a small pool already, and it's a really nice home as well. It's a nice Milton home, and you hate to turn it into the size of a bathtub or just something that's not very visually appealing. And yeah, that little nodule you have sticking out, I mean, it's maybe a couple of feet, you know, and
Well, I'm looking at the top diagram I'm looking at the lobe, or if you call it, whatever you want to call it, that's closest to the house. That's where you would be, you know, being much closer to the house, right? You said it would be like 10 feet away now. That could not be sort of cut off there, that lobe that comes up on the top right? I mean, isn't that what would give you the room? Or am I misunderstanding this?
I mean, yes, I just don't really agree in terms of trying to make it something that would be a nice job whenever it's done. The pool that we designed, well, you know, there was already one variance approved, but the pool that we designed is smaller than the previous pool. It encroaches less than the previous variance approved. So we feel like while we've got a smaller pool encroaching less, getting it closer to the house and a variance that was already approved, so we felt like we've really made a lot of concessions on trying to get it, you know, what the homeowners wanted. I mean, the homeowners could have just gone with this previous pool. They just didn't want that pool. It was a larger pool, and it just wasn't what they were interested in. Yeah, I mean, we could definitely do that, and we could push it up closer to the house. But we were out there. We tried to do everything we can to still have something that's visually appealing, something that fits with this house. And it is a small pool. I mean, I think I build more pools in Milton than anybody, and this is a very small pool.
Yes.
If you want, as one of the options, leaving the same configuration of the pool, just rotating, not actually moving it closer, but pivoting it. In other words, let me show you. You can pin it on one end.
Yeah, move that upper logo.
So you wouldn't lose any dimension to the house.
Rotating it this way?
That's right.
Towards the left rear corner of the home?
Towards this, yeah. So this distance would still stay the same, and you would just rotate it slightly. We could work with them to get it out of that 50-foot area. And not lose any area on the pool.
The one area you're talking about as you're coming out of the house, that's kind of where you access the pool area. So it's kind of the entry into the backyard. So
At the left rear? So what was just being described was rotating the pool at the left rear of the home, closer to the home, to pull that nodule within the 25-foot impervious. And so in relation to that, where is the entrance and egress from the home?
it's really from about where the 341 number is on the house, from there all the way down.
At that closest point? All the way down to the end of the home?
That's correct.
You're talking about a clockwise rotation? Is that what you're looking at?
That's what staff was just describing to me, was to take this left rear corner.
I was thinking a counterclockwise would make a better fit.
Yes, that's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah,
In other words,
counterclockwise.
sorry, you pin
Rotating this
it from the top, and counterclockwise or over. It's just a small rotation, and it would fit in, and it would work. We could work with the applicant to make sure we get the same size pool and volume, and you would lose small amount of deck area, but it's only rotating, so it's not. It's like a small pipe.
Can you speak?
How much are you? What are you proposing when you say a slight little bit? Are you talking about 1 foot or
You want to take a look?
5 foot.
So there's a 9-foot encroachment into the 50-foot.
Yeah, I don't know how you get rid of 9 feet and 25 feet by rotating
Just
it.
rotating this slightly this way. Get this to be out of the buffer. Just move it over slightly.
About 9 feet.
I just don't know how that moves at 9 feet.
No, we could rotate it for you and get it out of there.
Are there any other, so there's a couple other identifiers on this plan that aren't apparent to us. Topography perhaps plays into the mix here with, I heard mention of retaining walls. Can you identify what the feature is with this nodule or this line that comes off the top right, as well as what is at the bottom portion? There's some text there. It's illegible.
That's just kind of outlining as far as where the pool deck would be. Or you're talking about on the that would be like a wing wall. So the back side of the pool will be kind of exposed out of the ground.
Okay. So there is topography where it slides off.
That's right. So if the topography is like this, we're going to have the back side of the pool serving as the retaining wall. Again, in an effort to stay as much out of the setback as possible.
And that's a wing wall that comes off to provide a transition down to the
That's
lower
right.
level?
Yeah, because the house going down towards the pond, it goes down, right? So the back side of the pool would be exposed, and so that wing wall would just provide a little support for the dirt on each side of the pool.
And the lower part of the pool where what you can see where there's text noted there, is that pool equipment or what is that? Right here.
It's right there. Yeah, I can't read that either.
Pool equipment's along the side of the house, yeah.
It says rock wall.
Oh, rock wall?
I think that's what text on the bottom says.
You have good eyes.
Yeah, I'm not sure
I think it says rock.
what you're saying, what you're looking at.
Right below the 495 text,
Okay.
there's also, it looks like part of a retaining wall.
There's an existing rock retaining wall there now.
Okay.
So the pool would take the place of that.
I would just ask, I mean, maybe it's not fair because the owners aren't here, but, I mean, other than the fact that it would be a little closer to the house, I mean, I'm not sure of the hardships here in complying with the ordinance. I don't quite see it. Is there anything else you can say in terms of what would make it extremely hard to meet this ordinance? I mean, all I've heard so far is that it would be a little closer to the door.
Well, part two, I think you're concerned with part two. Part one is the impervious setback. Part two is the stream buffer portion. The part two is what is concerning? Part one, it can't be avoided because I shouldn't say that. Part one is the impervious setback. I'm not sure what you would be suggesting as an alternative there.
Oh,
The house is already impervious.
yeah, the house is already there, yeah.
I have a question. This gentleman said that they could use the previous variance. Is that true?
They can build what was permitted in 2015. They got a permit tomorrow, yeah.
Okay.
So I guess,
So they were allowed to encroach 25 feet and 14 feet before
So it was a little further.
and so now we're asking for less.
for 25 and 9.
That's correct.
So they are already approved to encroach more.
We'll take that into discussion.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for the applicant to clarify this plan? Okay. With that, you can take a seat. We're going to have public comment, and then you'll have a chance to
Thank you.
close at the end. All right, with that, I'll open the floor for public comment. We'll do this in two stages. If you're here to speak in favor, we'll do that as one group. And if you're here to speak in opposition, we'll do that as a separate group. Each group is allotted a maximum total of 10 minutes. First, I'll start with anyone here that's to speak in favor of this applicant. If you please come forward. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Okay, there is no public comment for the record. As the applicant, you have an opportunity to make any closing comments based on what we've discussed to date.
I found something on the web about when you're speaking opposition.
There he has some point to make.
All right.
I don't think he knows you're talking to him.
Mr. Dover, you have an opportunity to make any closing comments before we close the public hearing. Okay. With that, we'll close the. Before I do that, is there any following questions for the applicant or for staff before I close public comment?
I have a question. Why did you not like the original variance?
Yeah, it really wasn't a case of whether I liked it. It was just the homeowners. They just personally didn't like that design. So they wanted something. That pool was a little bigger. They didn't want one that large. It was not really in the right exact location. I mean, it was still kind of relatively in the same location, but they just wanted a smaller pool. And this is the one that they liked.
Okay.
So.
Okay. I have a question from staff, and it's related to timelines. The prior applicant, do you recall from the record whether or not they were homeowners prior to us becoming a city and the ordinance changing? Was that part of the consideration of their getting an appeal?
I don't know when the original homeowners built the I'm not sure.
Or secondly, do you know when this home was built? That would also be an indication.
Yeah, I think all of that's in the other folder. I didn't bring the original one. So off the top of my
The reason I'm asking staff to investigate that, the ordinance changed and when we became a city to be more restrictive in terms of the stream buffers and the impervious setback, and that has been a consideration for us as it relates to a current homeowner who was then subject to that change versus a homeowner buying into those conditions knowingly.
It doesn't
No,
read
so
the timeline, but
the ordinance changed after the house is built. That's why half of the house is in the impervious setback and buffer now. I just don't know exactly when.
Okay, so that explains the home was built prior to the ordinance changing, and therefore we're trying to make a determination accordingly. Okay, thank you for clarifying. Any additional questions for the staff or the applicant before I close public comment?
Am I being thick here? I don't understand. They had a variance that allowed them to encroach more than they're asking for now.
The prior homeowner.
But they said they could use the same one.
Mm-hmm.
So I
They
guess.
don't want to build that. So
It was conditioned
So it
on
was
that specific
that
site
design?
plan.
Okay.
Yeah, it was conditioned on
the
that
board
site plan.
conditioned it to a specific site plan.
Okay.
And so we don't have a modification or administrative modification to a variance or anything like that. So they're back
Okay.
here.
Got it.
In your dealings with the applicant, did they understand this going into this process?
They weren't happy about it, but yeah.
Okay. All right. Any additional questions? Okay, with that, I will close the public comment, and I'll open the floor for a motion and a second.
I still have a question.
Approve with conditions.
Make
Is
a
this
motion, and we'll
discussion?
have a
Is
discussion.
this discussion period?
Need a motion.
Oh, no
We'll need a
discussion?
motion first.
You already made a motion.
No.
We've not made a motion.
All right. I'd like to make a motion that we discuss further why this can't be modified to meet the ordinance requirements.
Make a motion to either approve, deny, or defer, and then you can discuss
Oh, we
the
can't
merits.
talk about it until we do it? Okay, then I make the motion to deny the application for the variance.
Do we have a second?
Okay.
I'll make a second for discussion purposes.
Okay.
Go ahead with your discussion.
Well, I'm still quite confused because of not understanding and being able to read the dimensions, okay? So I would like to understand, Todd, what you mentioned before. You know, when I said, why can't we just rotate the pool, move it up, and that we would satisfy the ordinance? And I think you made the comment that we only would be satisfying one of these, not the other. And quite frankly, I'm just not seeing that on here. I'm just looking for if someone can explain that to me a little bit better. It may be just the size of this that's difficult to see.
It is.
Sorry. So, let's see here. From here, your 75-foot starts here. So from here to here, all of this is impervious setback.
I can't even see what you drew. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So all of this is impervious
Well, it's
setback.
basically
whole thing.
the house
So even if you rotate
from the
it,
house
you get
out.
this little
Oh, so
nodule
this
out of
is
here, all of this is still going to
The rest of it's going to, okay.
So you can get it out of here,
Okay.
to 50 foot,
Here.
but you can't get it out of this 75.
This little part right here is.
So, I mean, you
So we
can
still
approve-
have,
Impervious,
okay.
including-
So that
You can
doesn't help us.
approve a variance for the 75
move it out of
and not for the 50. You can approve part of it.
So we're really basically talking about that 9 feet.
Yeah. I understand now. Okay.
that clear?
Yeah, thanks.
So, is that clear for you? Kim and I were just discussing the entirety of the pool is in the impervious, as is part of the house. This nodule is in the 50-foot stream buffer.
Right.
Even with the staff's comment and suggestion around rotating, without specific dimensional references, at the closest point, it's 10 foot from the rear of the house. I would guesstimate then at the furthest, it's probably 13 feet. Neither allows enough to slide 9 foot out.
Right.
I mean, now you create other health and safety issues with a pool being too close to the rear of the house as far as children, et cetera. So we're left with a couple points in discussion, I think. One is the home was built prior to the setbacks, and therefore the home itself is in the impervious. We're dealing with a transfer of ownership from an existing variance that was passed that was less restrictive than this proposed plan. So I'm not sure what more they can do to mitigate. They've got a retaining wall in the back. They've got a, what do they call it, a rain garden to manage any runoff absorption. What other discussion did you have
Well,
before I take a vote?
I guess I would say that, it seems our job is to try to meet these requirements, and I don't see the hardship here. Yes, they wouldn't be able to build a pool, but are we trying to uphold the intent of these ordinances, or are we trying to just say you can have a pool?
Well, they can build the pool under the original variance that was granted still.
Apparently, yes. I mean, but I can't go back and change that or do anything about that, right? So I can't change that, right? We can't change that. That's there. But if we think about what we're doing going forward and trying to meet the intent of these ordinances, yes, I'm very mindful that maybe this would not allow them to build a pool, and I'm not saying that, but shouldn't we be trying to, meet the ordinances as they are today? And when the owner moved in, they understood, or should have understood, that these ordinances existed when they moved in. Well, let me just ask one more question. If we were to disapprove this, they can still go back against the original variance, right?
They can build what was
Okay,
approved
so-
in the original
so
variance. They can get a pool.
Right. I just don't feel that this board should go forward approving this, knowing that it doesn't meet the intent of the ordinances. It doesn't, we are acting on today, not acting on yesterday. So I would think we should disapprove and let them go back and use the original variance. It allows them to get their pool. That's just my comment. Okay? Okay.
Okay. Is there any further discussion before we take a vote on the motion to deny?
I understand where you're coming from and trying to support the ordinances. But what they're asking for is less of an intrusion into the setback. So to me, it seems we're doing a better job if we're reducing the encroachment by approving this variance versus allowing them to encroach more and using the old variance. Just if we're looking at footage,
Impact.
Yeah.
I'm also looking at this from the lens of the homeowner who bought this home, identifying very likely through that process that there was a variance in place that would allow for a pool. They would therefore be expecting they could build a pool. And them coming with something that is smaller in footprint would seem to be acceptable from a homeowner's viewpoint. I do see your point, and I appreciate you looking to clarify and seek ways that we could potentially mitigate further. Okay, any further discussion? So as it stands now, we have a motion and a second to deny case V17-015. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Aye.
Aye.
The motion does not pass, does not carry. Did you vote, Don?
I abstained.
You can't abstain on your own motion.
Oh, okay. I can't abstain on my own motion. Wait a minute now. Okay. So I vote to deny it.
Okay, so, and Ken, I didn't hear your aye or for or against?
Against the motion.
All right, again, so the motion.
And I was going to get clarification on Don's for or against the motion. You said to deny it, deny the motion?
Yeah, are you against the motion to deny?
Are you in favor of the motion?
I'm in favor of the motion to deny.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So one for or against the motion does not carry. I'll open the floor for another motion.
I'll make the motion to approve V17-015 in regards to the site plan dated June 15th, 2017, and taking into consideration, I don't think, the staff recommendations of having the retaining wall match the existing rock wall and walkway.
Okay, I have a motion in favor on two conditions. One per the site plan dated 6/15/17. Second condition is the proposed retaining wall to be clad to match the stone. Is that what it?
Existing rock wall and walkway.
Existing retaining wall clad to match existing rock wall and walkway. I'll second. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Who seconded? You seconded?
I seconded it. Any discussion? Okay. Having no discussion, I'll seek a vote. All those in favor to approve V17-015 with the two conditions, one pertaining to the site plan, second to the retaining wall being clad to match the existing rock wall and walkway. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passed unanimous. Moving on to the next item on our agenda is V17-019-13641 Providence Road. Would staff please present?
17019. So next case. The site is a single-family home on 2.3 acres zoned AG1. It is located in the rural Milton overlay. Scott Reese of Rumble Reese and Associates is representing the owner, David Marsden. He would like to build a 60 by 120-foot tennis court to the side and rear of his house. The court will encroach into the minimum rear yard by 23.2 feet. It will not encroach into the 25-foot side yard setback. The construction of the court will also include a 58-foot-long absorption pit and a 5-foot retaining wall. Section 64-1602B1 states that recreational courts serving single-family detached dwellings shall be located in the side or rear yards, but shall not be located within a minimum yard. Since Mr. Reese proposes a court that will be 26.8 feet into the rear from the rear property line, a variance is required. On November 7th, 2017, the DRB offered the following comments. The tennis court seems larger than it needs to be. If we reduce the size of the court and move it up a few feet towards the house, it looks like you would not need to encroach into the rear yard and not seen in hardship. And just to continue on the background a little to reflect on the DRB comments, the applicant originally proposed a larger tennis court, and between the DRB hearing and now he has reduced it to the size that you currently see. Staff held a focus meeting on November 5th, 2017, at which the following comments were provided. Site plan, the city architect, DOT transportation, and stormwater had no comments. The arborist stated the area to the north and east of the proposed court are to be left undisturbed and planted where sparsely vegetated. Additional diverse planting areas are required to the south of the court. For the applicant's response to the standards of consideration, I'm going to refer to the letter of appeal. And the applicant states that when Mr. Marsden contacted us to provide a site plan for permitting, we discovered that the tennis court would not fit in the allowable building area. The setback ordinance inherited from Fulton County prohibits recreational courts from being constructed in minimum setbacks. The placement of the tennis court is predicated on the preservation of the usable soils for septic systems, location of the house and pool with preservation of specimen trees, and the rural Milton overlay. Since the ordinance allows pools, decks, patios, outdoor kitchens, parking driveways with basketball goals, dog pens, and chicken pens, in our opinion, an unlighted personal tennis court allowed in the minimum rear yard does not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance. The court can be constructed 25 feet from the side yard, but the 50-foot rear setback requirement seems an ambiguity without logic. It is our opinion, if the variance is granted, that the construction of the unlighted court intended for personal use would not affect the adjoining or surrounding much more than other allowable uses. It is also our opinion that the variance is granted, no substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties or the public safety, health, and welfare will be caused. The staff responds as follows. The spirit of the ordinance will not be supported by the approval of this variance. The applicant can move the court up 23 feet so that it is flush with the front of the house. The ordinance attempts to minimize the impact of these courts on adjoining neighbors and the public in general. The applicant should not minimize the impact of the court on his own yard while increasing the impact on adjacent properties. It's staff opinion that there are no extraordinary or exceptional conditions that prevent the court from being moved out of the rear setback. The grading and fill can be spread out, and a retaining wall can be built in the rear of the court if necessary. There are no specimen trees that need to be avoided. The 22 feet in question would not cause a substantial detriment to the general public good one way or the other. However, the court will be visible from Hopewell Road either way. However, since the setbacks are there to protect the adjacent neighbors from any disturbance caused by the court, it's staff's opinion that they should be respected. Denial of the variance would not prevent the owner from being able to build the court. Substantial justice would still be done. Should the board choose to approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions. No lighting of the court is allowed, and a planting plan shall be reviewed and approved by the city arborist. Staff recommends denial of this request.
Are there any questions for staff?
Angela, I've got a question for you. How much of a reduction happened based on the design review board's input?
So, now I'm going to pass these. These are the original site plans.
So let me just fill you in. What happened was the applicant came in and inadvertently showed a much larger pad than what was required for a typical tennis court. So when we brought that to the applicant's attention, he said, okay, I'll bring it down to a 60 by 120 pad, which is your typical fence line for a court. Not the court itself, but the fence line area around the court. The DRB said, well, okay, with the 60 by 120, we would make the recommendation of just moving it forward, flushing it pretty much with the front of the house or the front wall of the house or the porch. Either way, you can move it out of that rear setback and clear it and make it conform to the requirements of the ordinance.
So if you see on the original site plan, the proposed pool was 71 feet by 142 feet. The encroachment into the rear yard was about the same, but since it was bigger, it was pretty much flush with the front of the house. So now, it's smaller, and we're just recommending that it start pretty much at the same place where the original one did.
Originally, when he came in, he thought that the pad needed to be bigger, and he did have it at the front of the house here. So then when we brought to his attention that the tennis court was way oversized for a typical tennis court, which is 60 by 120, he reduced it, but he still left it at the rear, and he took it from the front. And the DRB is saying, well, all you had to do is you originally asked us for it up at the front. All you have to do is bring it forward, and this would be just where this is originally. So there's really no hardship on, they felt there was no hardship. I mean, bringing it forward would still work.
Don and Ken, do you understand the original versus the current? Okay. Okay. Any additional questions for staff? And I do have one. So the minimum standard footprint for a tennis court would be 60 by 120.
That's correct.
This is a standard.
That's your
That's
standard
standard.
size.
All right.
Is this house built?
Yes.
Okay. All these things say proposed. That's why I wasn't sure.
That's the site plan they use for the building permit,
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
Is the pool in?
I think so.
It's under the house, and all the improvements are under construction at this point in time.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Any additional questions for staff? All right. With that, I'd ask the applicant to go ahead and present.
Did you turn you on, Scott, or you got it?
Please announce your name and address. Forgot to do that earlier.
Should be in.
Have my pictures, Bob. Have pictures, so why am I?
Easier this way than
No, you have to get out and go to, you had it on several pieces of the flash drive, right?
Everything should have been in this one.
That's why.
I thought when you clicked it on, wasn't there several in there?
In there.
You have to go back to where you were.
It is not loading.
Yeah. want me to come down and take a look? See if I can-
What's that?
You want me to come down?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm Scott Reese with Brumlow Reese and Associates, doing business at 13685 Highway 9, Milton, Georgia. I'm here representing David Marsden in his application for a variance to construct a tennis court in the minimum rear yard setback. Where did you click on?
I just clicked the thing here. So these are your different
Yeah.
pieces that are
Okay,
within.
yeah, all right,
you
that's
were
what I
looking
need.
for.
So, Mr. Marsden and his neighbor, Mr. Fullerton, purchased this property last year, divided the total tract into 2 lots, and are constructing their personal houses. We did the site plans for the residences, and then Mr. Marsden came in and wanted to put a tennis court in, or it was his intent the whole time to put a tennis court in. And I was the bearer of bad tidings, and a tennis court is considered by the city of Milton as inherited from Fulton County as a structure. So it does not have the same rules and regulations as a tennis court, a parking area, a driveway with a basketball goal, any number of other uses that you can extend up to or very close to the property line. So when I shared that knowledge with him and we tried to work the pool or the tennis court in, would not fit within the setbacks. The placement of the house, it was dictated by the specimen trees in the front yard, and the City of Milton ordinance requires that an accessory structure, in this case the tennis court, must be behind the front line of the house. So everything, because of the specimen trees, the large oaks in the front, and with the grading to stay out of the critical root zone, everything was shifted back. So the original site plan showed a 70 by 140, which was an oversight. It did not show any grading or anything else. When I received notice that we would have a recommendation of denial, we proceeded to at an additional cost, do a fine-tuning of exactly what would have to occur, not just an overview of a spot. We did everything that would be required to build the tennis court. I had a soil scientist go out. This front yard area is star soils, which is unsuitable for any type of percolation or infiltration. It has an extreme high water table. So I have a perk test just below the absorption pit that is as far south as I can go with my absorption pit. You'll notice the star soil highlighted on your screen, and that is an unsuitable soil. I have the level 3 soil survey from the soil scientist that designation of the soils and their capabilities. So the house is in. The basement access is to the right on your screen, or to the east. So the basement is at 992. That blue line that's shown there is the swale that we will have to take the water out. I've highlighted, and it was originally orange, but I guess it's showing up as a light brown on your screen, the retaining walls that we're going to have to put in to maintain the flow of water out of the basement and around the tennis court. The absorption pit has to go where it has to go. It has to be gravity flow. I can't go any further to the south with it. The grading is such, we're holding the back of the tennis court at grade level where we do not have to disturb any of the trees behind the tennis court or any of that area. If we have to shift the tennis court, we're going to have to go into extraneous retaining walls. The wall now is 5 feet. If we go forward and with the falling away, I'm going to have to come up with either a variance for a over 6 foot high retaining wall or put again multiple retaining walls, extra grading, extra disturbance. This is, in my opinion, the least obtrusive location and grading plan that we can come up with. You will also notice in your packet a letter from the adjoining neighbor who is in, they have expressed their approval for the variance. So the neighbor that we're trying to protect is in agreement. If we shift everything forward, then we're creating a viewscape along Providence Road. I guess that's a typo on Hopewell Road earlier. Is that correct, Angela? When we were saying the view along Hopewell Road?
Providence, yeah.
Okay, all right. I thought that. I just wanted. So that is the gist. For protecting the public at large on the viewscape, the neighbor in the back who would be affected is fine with it. If we have to shift it forward, our grading is going to go extraneous, and we may have to come back for a variance on a 6-foot high retaining wall. Because the basement level is such, and I've got to get that water out, my absorption pit has to be lower than the drainage area. I can't go any further south. So those are the extraneous measures that are placed on this, or that come with this lot for the location. I understand it's the board's position to try to uphold the rules, but it's also in the logic that when there are extraneous measures and we're not upsetting the neighborhood or the common good, that this is the role of the board to find a way to let the public at large or a private citizen be able to operate within the ordinances. So I think we've addressed the reasons for and the fact that we're not upsetting the neighborhood or the public domain. The person that will be affected, we have a letter from them saying they're fine with it. Mr. Marsden is here also if we have any more questions. That's pretty much everything I can say in the presentation. This site plan, as opposed to the previous one, shows the grading and the absorption pits, the stormwater runoff, the retaining walls, everything. This is a final site plan that would be required for a building permit. The other one was a site plan to just go through the variance process, but this details out with the grades on the tennis court, the hardline grading contour lines, the heights and lengths of the retaining walls, and the sized absorption pit and its location that has to be based upon the soils. Thank you for your time.
Hang on. I have a couple questions. The current home, as it's cited, is approximately how many feet back from Providence Road?
is by my best guess.
Approximately.
Put the front building line, I'm doubling that, and we're right behind that.
So 130 foot or so setback from Providence Road to the front of the home.
Yes.
You identified in your closing comments there that this is a final plan indicating retaining walls as well.
Yes.
Can you help me identify, or this board identify more closely, the retaining wall plan, the 5-foot retaining wall from?
In the video, if you look down at your video.
Is this the orange?
Orange or brown, or I'm just watching.
Right here?
It's that orange line.
Okay.
Orange lines.
This one
The green?
shown in green.
And this one right here.
This one here.
And this is a 5-foot retaining wall as currently
Yes.
proposed?
Yes.
And by moving the tennis courts further forward,
Since the contours are dropping to the street, the wall has to go higher.
Yeah, I do have a comment on that.
Because the difference between the bottom of the wall and the top of the wall is going to stay static, and the bottom of the wall is going to drop because the contours, those dash lines as you go to the street are dropping in elevation.
So there is not a retaining wall at the street facing of the tennis court. It's
No.
actually curved along the side of the home.
Right. If we pull it forward, that will change. And
Yes.
I don't know to the extent, but
Can
I
you
know it
comment
will
regarding the retaining wall impacts?
I will. When you place an element like this on a site plan that slopes, you have to select the elevation, sort of a finished floor elevation, finished elevation of the tennis court. They've held the highest point of the rear yard, thus bringing the whole tennis court raised up as it's going towards Providence. So if you look at the contours, you got almost a 10-foot deviation between being on Providence Road and then seeing the tennis court. The tennis court's going to look elevated from the street even more. The recommendation would be to, if the applicant wanted to use the front yard elevation and then come back, the retaining walls would then be in the rear yard. You wouldn't see any retaining walls against the house. It would give them much more ability to swale next to the house, and it would lessen the elevation from the street, so you wouldn't see that prominence of a tennis court. Because you have to remember, you're also going to have probably a 6 or 8 foot high fence around that tennis court. So it's going to even appear bigger, is what I'm saying.
Understood.
So just to clarify to the board that it's not just that if you were to shift this forward the way it is, yes, that retaining wall that he's showing would increase. But if you were to lower the elevation of the tennis court proper, it would just diminish the retaining wall almost altogether, but he would have to do something in the rear. He would probably have to dig into the dirt rather than build out. But that's kind of in the rear. So the visual impact from Providence would be less if you did it.
And as this alternative you're suggesting or enlightening us to would be moving the tennis courts further to the front out of the rear setback, and
That's
therefore
correct.
a variance would not even be required.
That's correct. And he could build retaining walls in the rear yard without as of right. So he would be totally in no need of a variance. So we could move this and get it to work.
That's a mitigation.
Yeah, and if the soils are bad in the front yard, obviously they're much better in the rear yard because that's where the septic is now, currently on the left side of your site plan. So obviously maybe there's just bad soils towards the front.
Yeah,
and better soils
the
at
rear
back.
looks to be Helena, which, based on this soil investigation report, is equally unsuitable as Star.
Yeah, I mean,
Am I reading that correct?
If you see unsuitable by there, it's... So
Okay.
the soils
It
in
is
the
an
back
option.
are elevated higher. I can't make gravity flow uphill. So my absorption pit cannot go higher in elevation. If we slide forward, we're going to have more impact from the road. The closer you pull it to the road, the more impact.
But it's going to be
And then
low.
we would dig out, and then the backyard. So instead of leaving it as the neighbor so desires, natural, we can then, if we have to, if the board denies us and we have to go to extraneous measures, then we will dig out the backyard and totally change that natural contour into unnatural grading. That's our alternatives.
I don't want to contradict it. I just want to clarify.
Okay, so right now,
If you want, I'll clarify.
and we're setting the back of the tennis court at elevation 97, which is the natural ground or as close proximity as it would be. So if you'll notice and I hope you've got a screen that can, I don't know what you're looking at.
We can see both.
Okay, so right now, the way we're proposing, the tennis court is flush with the background. So the ground in the back at 26 feet away from the property line will stay the same. The tennis court will be flush with existing ground. The trees along that back property line will stay. If we change and we do the grading in the back, we're going to then grade it, because we won't need any variances or anything. We're going to grade it at the least cost to the property owner. So we will probably start at the property line, remove that buffer, which is not a buffer because it's ag against ag, and we will radically change the look of the back instead of natural. That will be what will happen.
So you don't have to pick one or the other as a board. In other words, the applicant could say, instead of going up 6, he could just pick something in between, dig a little bit out of the back, 2-3 feet, and just grade that. That would be minimal disturbance, and add 2-3 feet in the front, and that would be minimal disturbance. So you don't have to go one extreme or the other. He could pick a point in between the two elevation grade differences and still move the tennis court forward. And if he needed a small wall in the back, I mean, I've seen many tennis courts constructed where the back wall is a retaining wall, and then the fence is even less on the wall, because that's like a safety area.
Mr. Sisson, you had a comment?
What's your proposed elevation for the court?
97. It has to have 0.5% fall to shed the water. So it's 97 on one side and 96.5 on the other side to allow the water to drain out.
He's picking this point.
And the topo
here,
in that area
97.
essentially slides from 997
And,
down
well, this is the
front
old-
of the home around
This is the old plan.
992.
So he's picking that point.
Okay, so it's a
as the high
5-foot
right here.
grade.
He's picking this point here as the high point, and then adding all this dirt in here.
Let's see.
We feel like this is the least amount of disturbance as far as, especially from the road. You'll notice those contour lines. So we have, with the tennis court proposed location, those hard lines are graded contours. So instead of doing a 2-to-1 slope or a 3-to-1 slope that looks like a road bank, we've pulled those out to try to mimic a natural yard. So we've held the retaining wall on the left-hand side. We have to have because of the door to the basement. So I've got the 92 at the basement is a hard elevation that's there, and I've got to get the water out. I can't put water into the basement. So if I pull the tennis court forward and you limit my ability to do any grading in that area, then I'm going to have to come in with a retaining wall across the front, which we just went through an ordinance where we don't want retaining walls facing the road. So we feel like, and the applicant feels like, that we have found a happy medium and compromise with the grading. The backyard is left natural. The front yard is graded with enough room to where it will look like a yard, not a road bank or a steep bank. It's a manageable yard that can be cut with a lawnmower and maintained instead of a severe slope. So that's where we're at on why we're asking for the variance. It's not, if it was a simple pull-up, then there's no reason for us to just be demanding it without a reason.
You mentioned a letter from the neighbor. I don't see that in our packet.
I didn't put it in the packet, but I do have it.
This is the neighbor at the rear?
Yes, that is correct.
Where the encroachment would be towards his house, right? Is there other neighbors that would be impacted right there or not? Is that the only consideration?
That is the only property that touches the backyard.
This neighbor, I believe it was this neighbor, came in and asked some questions.
Sorry?
The neighbor to the side
Is what?
came in and asked questions. There's no letter. So the letter's from the neighbor in the rear, not the neighbor to the side.
Yeah, the side we're within the setbacks.
Yeah, so there's only the one neighbor at the rear.
Is who we're
That's
affecting,
that's
and they're fine with it. We're searching for a problem to throw a solution at. If the neighbor is fine with it, then and we're protecting the public at large because we're pushing it away from the road.
Did you just read my mind?
So the neighbor said here
No lights.
Whose writing is this on here with
The neighbors.
With the condition that there'll be no lighting?
Yes.
I don't quite understand. I'm sort of the opposite of the other. I don't quite understand the issue here. If the neighbor is not objecting, the public good hasn't been damaged because we're talking about visible.
Let's get to that when we get into discussion.
Oh, okay.
Unless you have a question for the applicant or staff.
I'm still under proceed.
That's
sorry.
okay. That's what I'm here.
Okay.
Keep me employed.
Okay. No, I think I understand that. Thanks.
Are there any further questions for the applicant?
I do have a question. So the overall, the quarters you propose, it's at 97?
The elevation,
Yes.
97 on the high side, 96.5 on the low side.
For lack of a better way, why so high?
To match the ground at the backyard.
So if it's moved forward within the setback lines, isn't it moving it down the slope?
Well, you can come down the slope, but I've still got to maintain the tennis court level at one. So wherever I pull, I'm going to come down. But with that, I can't pull forward. I've still got to keep my grade up to keep the water coming out of the basement and with the tennis court there. So by lowering it and pulling it forward, I'm still going to have the retaining wall problems in the front.
I don't follow you.
Okay, let me see. So it's sloping like this, okay? As I pull forward, this ground keeps going down. So if I pull it forward and I'm matching this, every time I move it forward, the front ground is dropping with me. So I'm still going to have, and the further I go, I don't have room between the absorption pit to do minimal grading with spreading my contours out. So I'm going to end up then having to put, if I've got an elevation change of this to this, and this amount of, rise over run, I've got to put a retaining wall in. If I've got them spread out, then I can grade it to where it looks like a natural yard. If I pull it and go down, the grading in the back is going to increase because that backyard, the slope fall is to the front. Those dash lines are the existing contours. If you'll notice, they're much further apart in the back. So pulling it forward, my background is staying about the same. The slope, the percentage of slope, the gradient is steeper towards the front. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Can I just add to that? You are correct. The more you bring it forward, the more the tennis court would drop. And if you pick
elevation.
In elevation. And if you pick the point in the middle between the high and the low point of where he wants to put the tennis court, you'd only have maybe 2-3 feet in the front, 2-3 feet in the back to grade. You don't really need a retaining wall. I mean, you have sufficient front yard to grade 2-3 feet, and you wouldn't need anything. I mean, 6 feet's a lot. But 2-3 feet, I mean, you could just grade that down. I think it would look more natural even without any retaining walls to just pick a point in the middle. And when the owner steps out of his house, he's not looking at a retaining wall anymore. He's just looking at his nice tennis court because he's at 92 in the basement, so there's no need to worry about putting a retaining wall there to get all that water. Now he's got to fight his own swale to get the water out because he's containing it next to the house. So I think by picking a point in the middle, bringing it forward, you eliminate all the retaining walls. And
if I bring it forward, we're going to be on the 990 contour. That's what I think. So, and then the grading is going to be in the back. There's going to be substantial grading in the back.
2-3 feet of grading in the back, but he's not encroaching.
4 or 5.
Right now, he's putting 23 feet of tennis court in the back. Good. So the other way, all we're doing is a couple of feet of, you could either put a small 2-3 foot retaining wall in the back and not disturb anything, or just kind of grade up to it. Could put a little boulder wall back there. And 2-3 feet's a garden wall. We don't even require a structural engineer on it. Anything less than 4 feet. So it's not really considered a major wall.
I understand the trade-offs.
Okay.
Rest of you got to this point?
I've got
Any more questions for the applicant?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
a question for the applicant.
Yes.
What is the distance from the front of the tennis court to the absorption pit? I see where we're going, the grade showing.
Yeah, it's probably 50 feet.
And the encroachment in the rear is requested is 23 feet. Okay. Any other questions? for the
yeah.
applicant?
What is that land to the rear property line? What is that? Is it a treed area or?
It's there's a hedge along the rear property line, and it was a field. It was a farm at one time. So this is where the tennis court would be going. Are you on your?
I'm not looking at your. Oh,
Is it on your screen?
We got it,
Yeah,
yes.
okay. Okay. That's looking which way, that first picture?
That is looking from the street to the rear property line.
And the one below it?
More to the east. And this is a close-up of that rear property line, which, if the variance is passed, the applicant has agreed to do some plannings with the city arborist to increase, I guess, for lack of a better term, a buffer along that property line, which if we don't do the variance, then we'll have to grade back there, but that's fine.
Okay. Any additional questions for the applicant?
My question is, just so I can clearly understand, this gentleman is proposing a compromise, but you don't seem like you're in favor of that compromise. And I want to know why are you feeling so strongly against that?
Well, the compromise in this case is going to create grading. Now we have grading just in the front. And we have a plan that shows where we're going to come back and manicure that grading to where it matches the yard. Because we have the area between the absorption pit and the tennis court is such that it's a wide enough area that we can recreate a natural look. If we pull it forward, and with the fact that the tennis court has to be flat, virtually, the gradient of the contours are steeper in the front. So we're going to end up with more, as we go forward with that gradient, we're going to have more elevation change across the tennis court. We're going to have more grading. Without room to negotiate a more natural grade, we're either going to end up with more retaining walls or a steeper grade that looks unnatural. Lifelong citizens of Milton, on property, on farms, that is not what I think, through the ordinances and all that I've sat through, that we want unnatural looking grading. Push the stuff in the back, keep it out of the rural view shed or the view as you go by. I disagree that by bringing it forward, you lessen the impact on the street. To me, the closer you bring the house or the tennis court to the street, more of an impact you see. We have those contours, the proposed grading. It's not going to be sitting up on a bank. It's a gentle slope to there. The neighbor in the back that will be affected, we've gone over it with them. Leave the tennis court at the ground grade, leave the trees on the back property line. They're fine with it. So, to me, the compromise of the less disturbance is what we're proposing. If if we're forced to go to another direction, there's going to be more area of disturbance, and it's going to look more unnatural. It'll be further away from that property line against the neighbor that doesn't care, and closer to the street where everyone can share in the view of the tennis court. So that's, I hope, did I answer it somewhat in a roundabout way, as
Yes, I think we get
so
the point.
likely do?
I think we get the trade-offs.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions for the applicant?
Do you guys want to keep that, or do you want me to move it? The board? You have it.
Okay. All right, with that, from a procedural standpoint, just to get everyone oriented, we've spent a long time on the presentation here. We'll first move to any clarifying questions from the applicant, which we have. We'll now move to public comment. Again, breaking this into two pieces, those in favor, those against, each get an equal amount of time, up to 10 minutes total. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this applicant? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to this case? Yes. Please announce your name and address for the
My name
record.
is William Burt Kent. I live at 13635 Providence Road, which is right next door. Basically, you can walk out my back porch and I can see where the tennis court's going.
Okay.
I'd like to thank the board for having me up here. Like I said, my name is William Kent. I'm a third-generation family member of that property. My grandparents bought back over 40-something years ago. In the past year, the Marstons seem like nice people, been building their nice home, relative structure to the beauty of the space of Milton, which we appreciate as a neighbor. However, he has asked my family to provide a signature to allow him to build a tennis court that encroaches on our property line, which they're claiming it doesn't. We will not agree to this, and multiple reasons include noise, privacy, ongoing maintenance. Bottom line, it goes against the codes which put in place for a reason, as Mr. Don Kirk has spoke correctly. We should lay out the way the house was built anyway. It's right in the back of our property as well. Like I said, they're a beautiful home. We're great neighbors, always been great neighbors. Basically, it's the way the way it's laid out. Fulton County, years ago, the property that they bought was owned by the Copelands, which used to own the whole area. So when he built the fence, he built it actually about 2 to 3 feet in from the actual property line. So if you really want to go to the variance would actually have to go back further. Okay. We preserve our natural community in Milton. Love it. I love being out to where I don't have to deal with, a bunch of neighbors. We all get along, but we're all spread out because it's a natural, loving, beautiful area, a quiet area. So, we've been here for over 40 years, and for our future homeowners as well. But we respectfully request that the city board here deny the request to allow a tennis court, not in a certain place. I mean, if they could find some place out of view, but it is literally, his map, which was gone, as we're on the right-hand side of where that tennis court is. The slope already brings water into our yard. We are also on a well, which has gotten disturbed a few times. We've had to get people out there to look at it, which is, going to happen with new construction. But we're not into, it costs thousands upon thousands of dollars to get the Fulton County to run water up there now. So I'm just asking that respectfully ask that we deny the petition to allow this variance.
If you don't mind, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
As you heard, if the applicant were to move this proposed tennis court forward, they would not require a variance. In moving it forward, would that be less of an intrusion on?
I'm going to see it either way. I mean, that's literally from here out to maybe the other side of this wall is where my fence line is, where my house sits that way.
So your house sits much further forward than?
Yeah, my house is further forward than theirs.
Okay. Okay.
I have a question too. You said they're building it on your property line. I don't understand that.
Well, the property line back 40 years ago when they built the old wire fences, they didn't know exactly where the line is, so they'd always go back 2 to 3 feet where the property line was proposed. And that's where ours is. On both sides, even in the back, our property line actually goes further deeper than the fence line.
So are you saying this tennis court is on your property?
No, it's not on my property, but it will be in the variance of my property.
On
The
It'll-
view, in the view.
Close to the fence line.
If you see this is the space. It's noted on the plan that's provided here where the fence is relative to the property line. You see the fence is inside from the property line.
Okay.
I mean, we like I said, we're good neighbors. We look forward to having more neighbors move in, but we want to keep this rural. I don't want to live in a tennis community. If I want to live in a tennis community, I'd move in the neighborhood. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Sir, could you fill out one of these, please?
It's in the basket.
Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition? All right, hearing and seeing no further public comment, interest in public comment, I'll open the floor back to the applicant for any closing comments before we close public comment.
You know, I respect the neighbor's opinion, and I know there will be a change if the tennis court's built. Sliding it forward is going to be closer to his house than where we're proposing it. That we're further back than the allowed. I mean, we're not far, but we're beyond the side setback. So we're not going to change no matter if the ordinance or the variance is granted or not. That sideline is not going to change. Pulling it forward is going to put it closer to his house in the real world. Once again, I just want to reiterate, the neighbor that we're affecting, you have a letter from them that says they're fine with it, be an unlighted tennis court. We feel like the proposed location is the least amount of disturbance, the least amount of retaining walls that will be required. If we have to deal with a change and regrade it and all, then we'll have to probably disturb a significant more area. Thank you.
Are there any questions before I close public comment to staff or the applicant?
Can you just reconfirm for me that if we slide the tennis courts forward, then a variance isn't needed?
That's correct. And it would also lower the elevation of the tennis court. Thus, when it's higher, it's more of an impact to a neighbor. When you're looking and you're sitting in your yard and somebody's got, they're sort of favored by being higher, I mean, the impact is greater. So by lowering the tennis court, moving it forward and lowering it would have less visual and noise impact to the neighbor. Thus,
He can be up to the front of the house.
he could be up to the front of the house.
Okay. With that, make note that the public comment is closed, and I'll open the floor for a motion and a second. I'll make a motion to deny V17-019 to disallow a tennis court to encroach in the rear minimum yard.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for denial. I feel, according to our variance considerations, staff and the applicant has even supported that moving this proposed tennis court out of the rear setback is possible with minimal impact. In fact, it would have a trade-off of lower visual impact to the neighbor and from a street view. So, based on our considerations, I don't see the hardship in this case. Any other discussion?
Oh, this is a way to discuss. Okay. Yeah, I seem to be against the grain here today.
It's okay, Don.
It seems to me the only person we're protecting here, the only impact really is the neighbor in the back. This gentleman here, I appreciate that he doesn't want a tennis court near him, but given that it could happen even if we didn't give a variance, I'm sorry about that, but I don't know that, we have no impact if they want to put a tennis court in or not. It's not against any ordinance putting one in. So I think we're looking at the rear. We have a neighbor in the rear saying he doesn't have a problem with it. I would imagine that the solution for the compromise could be maybe more expensive. Maybe that's why the builder is looking at doing it this way for the homeowner. I didn't get that for sure, but it sounded like that. Moving it forward, I think, would even impact the neighbor to the right more, even though I understood the discussion about it be lower. There's trees behind the tennis court at the rear area. I don't know whether that is assured to always be there or not. I'm not sure whether someone could take those down someday and it doesn't have an impact. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but I don't think that we're doing any more to uphold the public's view or anything by leaving it in the back. I don't think it aids the public anymore if we keep it in the back or move it forward, I should say. So I just feel like the only impacted area is the rear neighbor who is not objecting. So I don't think that we should deny this.
Okay. Is there any other discussion before we seek a vote?
Were there any requirements to have trees put in along around the tennis court for buffering?
The only recommended condition from staff was regarding not allowing lighting.
Well, I verbally added the one about the approved planning plan by the arborist, because he did make some recommendations for plantings.
Oh, and that's a good point. I would, along with what I said, I would say that if we consider going another way from this motion, I would say we should, eliminate the capability to put the lights in, that there should be not any lights. Okay. If that comes up.
So there is a site plan for trees?
No, I don't have a planting plan. I'd suggested a condition that one would be approved prior to, when that permit is issued.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion? So the motion is to deny V17-019. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-2, meaning this application was denied. Move on to our next agenda item, which is number 7, old business. Is there any old business, staff?
I have none. I don't think.
No old business. New business. As you've noted, Mr. Ken Sisson has joined our board, replacing Bill O'Connor, appointment by the mayor. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you.
Any other new business items?
I don't know if there's anything that's new, Ms., but I'll throw it out there to consider that the calendar, election of officers will be in the next, I forget if be aware if they're in the December meeting or the January meetings, but just be prepared to think about those.
In January?
Election of officers in January.
Is the calendar adopted in December, though?
Can we propose a calendar for December for 2018? And if we end up with the same Thanksgiving week, can we try to navigate around that and
set it up at the start
and do it this time?
Check something right quick.
And from a meeting standpoint, next month, what sort of caseload do we have besides the one deferral? Is there any?
We've got one I can't think of right now. We have a secondary variance, that deferral, and maybe one more.
Okay. And that would be for December 19th?
Secondary variance presentations next month.
Okay.
That might be a long meeting, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. My anniversary is on the 20th.
Okay, so yes, just...
Good thing it's not the 19th.
Yes. Okay. Any other new business? So we'll look for a calendar for 2018, and January we'll look for election of officers.
All right.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'd like to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and a safe holiday.
Same.
Same here. You too.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed unanimous. We are adjourned.